You're nothing but a liability to us now." My brother's voice sneered through the thin wall as I stood frozen in the narrow hallway, groceries still in my arms. "My name is Amelia Warren." And up until that moment, I believed that loyalty meant something. It was early spring in Cedar Creek, a sleepy town tucked between the Colorado Plains and the first whispers of the Rockies. I'd moved back a year ago after my mother fell ill, trading my growing career in software design for a cramped bedroom in my parents' old farmhouse. I told myself it was temporary, that family mattered more than ambition. But standing there overhearing Daniel and my parents speak so casually, so cruelly, about me, it cracked something inside that had already been splintering for years. "She's lucky we even let her stay here," Daniel added, his voice dripping with contempt. "Without us, she'd be nowhere." "Maybe it's time she started paying her way properly," my mother muttered. "That little online job can't be worth much." My father grunted his agreement. The groceries slipped from my arms, a can of tomatoes hitting the floor with a hollow clatter. I didn't rush to pick them up. I listened, letting their words fill every quiet corner I'd once tried to call home. I wasn't always the burden they now labeled me. There was a time, years ago, when my parents had boasted about me to anyone who'd listen. "Our Amelia," they'd say proudly. Graduated top of her class, full scholarship to Denver Tech, already designing apps by 21. I had worked hard, fought harder, clawing my way up through a male-dominated field where every success was questioned, every mistake magnified. By 26, I'd been leading small teams on major projects. My future had seemed limitless. Then Mom's diagnosis came, and the world I'd built with such careful precision began to unravel. She was scared. Dad was overwhelmed. Daniel, and I did what good daughters are supposed to do. Came home. I left my apartment overlooking the city skyline. Resigned from a job that still had so much promise. I told myself I'd find remote work, that it wouldn't be forever, and for a while it worked. I took freelance coding jobs, patching together enough income to cover my own expenses, picking up the slack around the house, sitting with Mom through endless treatments while Daniel managed the farm finances, meaning he spent most of his time complaining about how hard things were. They had accepted my help, welcomed my paycheck contributions when the hospital bills started stacking up. But love, respect, those were withheld like rewards I was no longer worthy of. And somewhere along the way, my sacrifices became expectations. My efforts became debts they believed I owed. After hearing what I heard that night, I made a decision. No screaming matches, no teary confrontations, just a quiet severing of the ties they'd already shredded. I packed my bags that evening, moving silently through the house I'd once tried so hard to save. I left a note on the kitchen table. "Thank you for teaching me that love isn't conditional. I wish you all the best." I didn't leave a forwarding address. I didn't leave my number. I just left. The little Honda Civic I'd kept running on freelance wages took me east, over the low rise of hills, down into Denver. I didn't have much. 3 suitcases, a laptop, and the raw, aching freedom of starting over. For the first time in months, maybe years, the air tasted sweet. I crashed for a few weeks on the couch of an old college friend, Jordan, who worked in cybersecurity. "You always had more guts than any of us," Jordan said one night, sliding a plate of takeout across the coffee table. "You just forgot for a while." I smiled, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. There were days when doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve, when the silence left by my family's absence felt louder than their judgment ever had. But every morning I got up, logged in, applied, built, brick by brick. Opportunity found me sooner than I expected. A small tech startup, Emberlight Innovations, needed a project lead for their newest mobile platform. They were scrappy, hungry, fearless. Exactly the kind of place I could rebuild from. I poured everything into that job. Long nights, Endless code reviews. Late coffees with a team where ideas flew faster than sleep ever could. Within a year, I wasn't just leading the project. I was part of Emberlight's core executive team, VP of Product Development, Equity Holder, Vision Shaper, Builder again. And when Emberlight's new app crossed 1 million downloads in 6 months, industry leaders took notice. Articles, interviews, panels. Suddenly, Amelia Warren meant something more than the girl who couldn't save the family farm. It meant a name built from nothing but grit and perseverance. I didn't hear from my family again until 2 years later. Email. Subject, help needed. From Daniel. The farm had gone under. Dad had gotten sick. Medical bills. Foreclosure notices. They needed help. After everything we did for you, Daniel wrote, you owe it to us to step up. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me, the small part that still ached with old wounds, wanted to slam the laptop shut, drive back to Cedar Creek, fix everything again. But the wiser part, the scarred and healed part, knew better. You don't rebuild your future by running back into a burning house. You build it by lighting your own fire and letting it guide you forward. I clicked reply. I'm sorry you're struggling, I wrote. I truly am. But I'm not your burden. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your scapegoat. I wish you all the best in finding your own way forward. I signed it simply, Amelia, and I hit send, feeling at last the full, unbreakable weight of my own worth. I spent the next few nights sitting in my tiny living room, the same battered lamp humming overhead, staring at the documents spread across my coffee table. The numbers were merciless. Cold. Honest. I had paid more than 3/4 of the mortgage. I had poured years of my salary, my late nights, my lonely weekends, into keeping that roof over their heads. And they sat at that kitchen table, sipping coffee I probably bought, calling me a burden. First, there was just silence inside me. The kind of silence that feels like the vacuum left after an explosion, when your ears ring and your body doesn't realize yet that it's bleeding. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, frozen, letting it all sink in. Then, like water seeping into cracked pavement, something colder began to grow inside me. Not hatred, not even anger, certainty. They would never change, no matter how many paychecks I sent, no matter how many milestones I reached. I would never be their real success, because their definition of success had never included me. I flipped through the pages until I found it. The clause Kate had insisted we include: option to purchase, immediate foreclosure rights upon missed payment, tenant eviction protocols. At the time I had thought it was all just legal noise. Belt and suspenders, Kate had called it. Protection against the unlikely. Now, it was a lifeline. I picked up my phone and called her. Heart steady, voice clear. She answered on the second ring. Lindsay, she said, and there was something in her tone like she already knew. I need to prepare the documents, I said. The 15th is coming up, and I won't be making the payment this time. There was a beat of silence, a respectful pause, before Kate spoke. Understood, she said simply. I'll have everything ready. I hung up and sat back, staring out the window at the San Jose skyline blinking in the distance. It was strange how quickly clarity could harden inside you. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was just done bleeding for people who would never stop cutting me. The next few days passed in a kind of surreal stillness. I went to work, led my team meetings, reviewed code, sipped coffee on the balcony of my apartment overlooking the city. Outside, everything looked the same. Inside, it was like tectonic plates were shifting. I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who stayed up late coding apps on a hand-me-down laptop, hoping that if she worked hard enough, built something impressive enough, Her parents would finally look at her the way they looked at Thomas. I thought about how hard she had tried, and how little it had ever mattered. And I made myself a promise. I would not waste another second of my life trying to win love that had to be earned through sacrifice. The night before the 15th, I got a text from my mother. "Sweetheart, hope you're doing well. We were wondering if you could help a little more this month. Thomas is going through a rough patch and the mortgage payment is heavier than usual. Family sticks together, right? Love you." There was a smiley face at the end. I've seen. I stared at the message for a long moment, then powered off my phone and dropped it face down on the couch. At midnight, I sat at my desk, staring at the mortgage dashboard. The system automatically processed payments on the 15th at 8 a.m. For the first time in 4 years, there would be no safety net waiting for them. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel glee. I just felt free. At 8:01 a.m., my phone buzzed with a system alert. Mortgage payment failed. At 8:15 a.m., I received a frantic call from my father. I didn't answer. At 9 a.m., the bank officially issued a default notice to Divine Investments LLC. At 9:03 a.m., Kate filed the foreclosure paperwork. It was done. I went to work that day lighter than I had in years. Like someone had taken an invisible backpack full of rocks off my shoulders. Nobody at the office knew, of course. To them, it was just another Tuesday. Code reviews, project briefs, brainstorming sessions. But inside, something monumental had shifted. For the first time since I was that little girl in Phoenix, I wasn't living for their approval anymore. I was living for me. That weekend, Uncle Jason invited me over for dinner. His place was small, cozy, filled with the smell of roasting chicken and the sound of old country records crackling on the player. He handed me a beer and nodded toward the backyard where his grandkids were chasing fireflies. "You did the right thing, kiddo," he said quietly. I didn't answer right away. Just watched the children laughing in the twilight. After a long moment, I said, "I didn't do it to hurt them. I did it because they were hurting me." Jason smiled, sad and proud at the same time. Sometimes, choosing yourself looks like betrayal to people who only loved the version of you that served them. I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep into my bones. For the first time in my life, I was choosing me, and it felt like breathing clean air after a lifetime of smog. It took 3 days before the real panic set in. The first call came from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. The second, from Thomas, ignored. Then came the emails. The first was sugar-coated. "Sweetheart, there's some confusion with the mortgage company. Could you help us clear it up?" The second was more urgent. "We're being told we're in default. This has to be a mistake. Can you look into it?" The third, a frantic wall of text from Thomas. "They're threatening foreclosure, Lindsay. You can't just sit there. You're part of this family." Part of this family. The irony stung more than I cared to admit. I sat at my kitchen table that evening, sipping a mug of tea, their desperate words blinking on my phone screen. And I smiled. Not out of cruelty, but out of the quiet realization that, for once, they needed me more than I needed them. At 9 a.m. sharp the next morning, the final notice went out. Default confirmed. Foreclosure initiated. Ownership reverting to Divine Investments LLC, which was to say. To me, I imagined their faces when they realized that the same daughter they called a burden, a joke, was the one holding the deed to the very house they sat in. Karma didn't always ride in with fireworks. Sometimes, it knocked politely at your door, with a letter bearing your name, and the undeniable truth you could no longer ignore. 2 hours later, the storm arrived. My phone rang, my mother's number. Then again my father's. And again Thomas. I let each call fall into the void. Until finally, my email dinged with a single subject line. "We need to talk." I almost laughed. All those years of feeling small, unwanted, replaceable. And now suddenly I was needed. I didn't respond. Instead I called Kate. "Time to draft the rental agreement," I said simply. She chuckled, low and knowing. "I'll prepare it. Standard lease terms. Fair but firm." I leaned back in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in years. "They'll hate it," I said. Kate's voice was dry. "They're lucky you're offering it at all." The rental agreement was sent that afternoon. Market rate. No family discounts. Strict penalties for late payments. Immediate eviction upon breach. Professional. Detached. Mercilessly fair. So, part of me wondered if they would take it. If pride would force them to walk away rather than live in a house owned by their disappointment of a daughter. But desperation has a way of silencing pride. Within 48 hours the signed lease returned. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just shaky signatures at the bottom of the page. So, they stayed. In my house. Paying me rent. Every month, like clockwork, a check would arrive. Made out to Divine Investments LLC. And every month, I'd deposit it with a small, private smile. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was simply balance. Restored. I didn't cut them off completely. I was polite, distant, professional. When they emailed about maintenance issues, a broken faucet, a leaky roof, I responded promptly. With contractor referrals and invoices. No emotional entanglement. No lingering hurt. Just business. Over time, the emails grew fewer. Shorter. More resigned. They never mentioned the arrangement. Never acknowledged the truth. Never once said thank you. And I realized they never would. But that was okay. I no longer needed their validation. I had found something infinitely more valuable. My own peace. It was about 6 months into our new arrangement when the final crack appeared. Thomas lost his job. Another bad deal. Another angry client. Another bridge burned behind him. The real estate company that Dad had worked so hard to build. The one Thomas had inherited. Folded like a house of cards. I heard about it from Uncle Ray, not from them. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply noted it. As you might note the first cool breeze of fall after a brutal summer. Something was ending. Something else was beginning. A week later, another email landed in my inbox. Subject line. Request for payment adjustment. I opened it. Slowly. Already knowing what I'd find. They wanted a reduction in rent. Citing unexpected hardships and temporary setbacks and family loyalty. Family loyalty. I stared at the words until they blurred together on the screen. Then very calmly, composed my reply. Dear tenants, thank you for your inquiry. As per the terms of your lease agreement, the rental rate is fixed until the renewal period. If you are unable to meet the current obligations, you are welcome to terminate your lease early, subject to standard penalties. Please let me know how you wish to proceed. Regards, Divine Investments LLC. I read it over once, twice, making sure it was perfectly neutral. Then I hit send. No hesitation. No second guessing. The next few days were a flurry of silent tension. No emails. No calls. Just waiting. Then, another message. Subject. Meeting request. They wanted to talk. In person. Part of me wanted to refuse. To stay behind my wall. Safe. Distant. Untouchable. But another part, the part that had once curled up crying in a childhood bedroom, wanted to see their faces. Not for revenge. For closure. I agreed. Sunday afternoon. The old house. The house that was mine, though they'd never say it out loud. I dressed carefully that day. Simple. Professional. No expensive jewelry. No showy designer labels. Just a clean white blouse. Dark jeans. And quiet confidence. I parked at the curb, taking a moment to breathe before stepping out. The air was heavy with desert heat. The same oppressive weight I'd known since childhood. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. I rang the doorbell. The sound echoed through the hollow house. My mother answered, looking thinner somehow. Older. Behind her, Dad and Thomas sat stiffly in the living room, papers spread out across the coffee table. "Come in," she said, her voice brittle. I stepped inside, feeling the way their gazes shifted. Assessing. Weighing. And for the first time, feeling utterly untouched by it. We sat, awkward, silent, until finally my father cleared his throat. "We're struggling," he said bluntly. "Thomas." Lost the company. Thomas shifted uncomfortably, staring at his hands. "And?" I asked, my tone perfectly polite. "We were hoping," my mother began, forcing a smile, "that you might consider forgiving some of the back rent. Or lowering the payments for a while." She reached for my hand across the table. I let her fingers brush mine, then slowly pulled away. "I'm sorry for your situation," I said carefully. "But the lease terms stand." Thomas scowled. "You're not even struggling. You have more money than you'll ever need." I tilted my head slightly. "And whose fault is that?" I asked softly. The room went very still. Dad leaned forward. "Don't forget who raised you, Lindsay. Who paid for your childhood. Your schooling." My schooling. The words twisted in my chest. Old wounds threatening to bleed. But I stayed steady. "You're right," I said finally. "You raised me. You taught me lessons I'll never forget." Thomas sneered. "Oh, cut the sanctimony. You owe us." I stood then, calmly gathering my purse. "I owed you nothing," I said quietly. "And I still owe you nothing." The door. I paused. "You have 30 days to decide whether you'll continue under the current terms or vacate." My mother's voice cracked as she called after me. "Lindsay, please." I turned back just once, meeting her gaze. There was fear there now, and something worse. Recognition. Recognition of who I had become. Not the disappointment, not the burden, but the woman who had built herself, brick by brick, without their approval, without their love. The woman who no longer needed them. I smiled faintly. "Family comes first, right?" said, and I left, the door swinging shut behind me, soft as a sigh, final as a heartbeat. The eviction notice went out 31 days later. They didn't fight it. Not really. There were a few angry emails from Thomas, a few tearful voicemails from my mother, even one stiff letter from a lawyer cousin trying to intimidate me. I ignored them all. The law was on my side. More importantly, so was the truth. They moved out quietly. Not even a goodbye. The house stood empty for the first time since I was a child. It smelled like old dust and forgotten arguments. I walked through it one last time, fingers trailing along the faded wallpaper, memories tugging at me from every corner. The backyard where I scraped my knees learning to ride. The kitchen where my certificate had been dismissed. The living room where Thomas's trophies had lined the shelves, while mine collected dust in drawers. It all looked so small now. Oh, harmless. I locked the door behind me and slid the keys into my pocket. The sale went through a month later. It fetched a good price. More than enough to pay off the remaining mortgage, with a hefty sum left over. But I didn't pocket the money. Not all of it. I set up a fund. The New Roots Initiative. Grants for first-generation college students, especially women in tech, especially the daughters no one believed in. Felt fitting. Building futures, where once I'd been denied one. Some nights, sitting on my apartment balcony, I'd watch the city lights blinking far below. The air in San Jose was cooler, lighter than Phoenix. Sometimes, I catch myself thinking about them, about the house, about the family dinners, about the way I'd tried so hard to earn what should have been freely given. But the ache didn't cut as deep anymore. It was more like an old scar, a reminder of a battle survived, not a wound still bleeding. One evening, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me. Answered. Lindsay. A familiar voice rasped, tired, smaller somehow. It was my father. I said nothing. I just wanted to say. He hesitated, the silence stretching between us. You were right, he said finally. And, I'm sorry. Another pause. I hope you're happy. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the wind lift my hair, the hum of the city rising around me like a song. I am, I said simply. I hung up before he could say anything else. There was nothing more to hear, nothing more to say. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I'd found my own peace, not in revenge, but in building something better. That night, I raised a glass to the skyline, to the girl who once cried herself to sleep, to the woman who chose herself. The best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's knowing you never needed their approval to be right. It's choosing freedom over old chains. It's choosing your own life, your own future, your own worth, and never, ever, looking back.